Hello, good afternoon. How many product people do we have in the room? A few. How many business people do we have in the room? A few. How many tech people do we have in the room? All right, quite a few. Excellent. Thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak here. Today I'd like to take you on a journey of what it means to scale a product specifically in Southeast Asia. So I'll speak a little bit about scaling the product, scaling the technology, scaling the team, scaling the operation, and then speak more about Southeast Asia. And in that context, I'll speak about the terms that are quite important here in terms of value, cost, speed, and trust. Just a quick introduction about myself. So I started my product career many, many years back, before the internet started, with a company called CompuServe, which was kind of the first commercial online service. And as Ludo said, most recently, I was CPO at e-commerce, which is the largest e-commerce enabler in Southeast Asia. And I'm currently advising startups through Antler and through Rainmaking. So how do you scale your product? Years back, when I was with MoneyGram, which is a remittance company, I was responsible for product in Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And I was looking to increase the rate of digital remittances out of Southeast Asia, and Singapore seemed to be a great place to start. And but the digital remittances in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, were actually quite low. And speaking to my colleague in Singapore, he said, well, come and join me. And so he took me to this place called Lucky Plaza in Singapore. You may have been there before. And when you go there on a Saturday or on a Sunday, the place is absolutely heaving with people all looking to send money back home. And so it's really floor after floor after floor, people queuing up, trying to send money back home. And so that's fantastic, that's amazing. That's my total addressable market right here. And surely nobody wants to spend their day queuing up to send money home. And so they will want to use a digital proposition instead. And then my colleague took me to one corner of the building, and there was a machine where you can send money through that machine. But nobody was there. Then he took me to a store where you could sign up to a mobile app and then send money through your phone. And again, there were very, very few people there. And so really, what I thought was a total addressable market where I could solve a real problem for them, in reality, it wasn't a real problem. Because all of these people came together on a Saturday and Sunday to meet other people from their country, to make friends, to build their social network. And so they're very, very happy standing there, queuing up all day, because it was a social event for them. And so I wasn't solving a problem for them at all. And quite often I speak with founders, and they talk about how this great new technology is coming out and that will change the world, or how they have had this problem and now they're going to solve that problem, or how their friends are telling them that that's a really, really great idea. But unless you really test your idea with your real customers, and Rose in the previous section was speaking about that, if you don't really test your product with real customers, you will not find out whether you have a real product and whether you're solving a real problem. And equally important, whether your target customers are actually willing to pay for you to solve their problem, whether it's on a monthly basis or on a one-off basis. But you also need to understand what alternatives do your customers, your potential customers, have. And very often, that alternative will be to do nothing. Once you have identified a real problem that you can solve for your customers, you need to make sure that your proposition is really, really simple, both in communication as well as in the product, and that is reflected in the customer experience. And obviously, Rose just spoke a lot about customer experience, so I will not go into that again. But you need to understand what the expectations of your customers in your target market in Southeast Asia are, and then use that to design your experience. So for instance, if you're setting up a coffee shop on Koh Samui, then maybe it is important that there's a great environment to take selfies and it's a nice ambiance, but maybe the speed of delivery is not so important. If you're setting up a coffee shop in CBD in Singapore, then the speed is very, very important, and maybe the ambiance is not so much important. And so the way that you design your experience, that then feeds into the memories that your customers take away from you, and that feeds into what they will communicate and speak to their friends and family about you, and come back or not come back. When do we launch? That's often is a big question, and the answer is launch as soon as possible. You really want to have that customer feedback as soon as possible, and maybe you can even start to sign up customers before you have a working product, but just present your product on a piece of paper. But getting customers on board, real customers, not friends and family, real customers, is super, super important. Getting a handful of reference customers as well. And I say a handful because if you just have one customer, then you're really just building a solution specific to that customer. And so it's important that you have a handful of customers so that you build a solution that really becomes a product for many, many customers. And those reference customers are very important because it allows you to test the value of your product. It allows you to communicate and prove either to your internal teams or to your investors that you have a product that has a value. And it allows you to use your reference customers to promote your product or your solution to further customers. Product management in Southeast Asia is still relatively young in comparison to some other parts of the world. And so if you're a product manager or if you're hiring product managers, chances are that your background is project management or your background is maybe engineering. And so it's really important to build up your expertise as a product manager and to cover all aspects of what it means to be a product manager. Not just to understand your product and the technology behind the product, but also understand your customers really, really well, whether internal or external, understand your competition really well, and all of these other things listed out here. And obviously, there are a lot of online references and that kind of help you become a really good product manager. And if you're interested, ping me after the event today, and I'm happy to share some of those with you. Also recommend that you find yourself a coach, or you find a coach for your team, somebody more senior who's been doing product management for a while, to help them become a full stack product manager and to be really, really good at that. As a product manager, you always work across all parts of the organization, right? You work with the engineering team, you work with the UI UX team, you work with the finance team, the sales teams, the marketing team, the operations team, many, many other teams. And it's your job to make those relationships work. And so find the teams where you have the most friction. And if you're in an on-site environment, then try to sit as close as possible to the teams with which you have the most friction. And that will really, really help you build bonds and address some of those frictions. Obviously, this is not the technology stream here, but I'm going to speak a few words about technology. As a product manager, you can really help your technology team to clarify whether the speed of launching or the ability to scale is more important. Because that has quite important architectural ramifications. Are you going to build a solid house, or are you going to build a throwaway MVP? At e-commerce, we build an MVP for a product called EMI Market Insights, where we're collecting data from marketplaces and then make the data available to customers through an online platform and through reports, so they understand what their market share is and what their competitors are doing. And we build that as an MVP, and turn out to be very, very successful. And then we turn it into a full-blown commercial product. That conversion from an MVP into a full-blown commercial product was incredibly painful from a technology perspective and operations perspective. But it allowed us to prove that, yes, actually there's a market for this product. And it also allowed us to be ahead of the competition because we've already started to learn lessons from what customers like, what customers don't like, what the operational and technical issues are of running this kind of product, which allowed us to always be ahead of competitors who started out later. There are also questions like, what's really at the core of your organization? What are you going to buy? What are you going to build? So for instance, if billing is not at the core of your organization, please don't build a billing engine. It's super complicated, and every time you change your pricing, you spend another 6 months rebuilding your billing engine. So try to buy as much as you can, but then when you buy things, obviously, that costs you OpEx rather than CapEx, because typically it's a subscription scheme. And so again, that's something that you want to discuss with the finance team, because that has bigger ramifications for the company. And you're going to build open APIs so that you can scale up quickly and allow other partners in the ecosystems to integrate into you and work with you. That takes longer, takes more discipline, takes more documentation, but it allows you to scale up faster, or you just build internal APIs and just try to launch as quickly as you can. And also align with your technology team on the space that they have to work on technical debt and foundational work, exploration, et cetera, et cetera. And equally important, communicate jointly what the product and engineering team have delivered over the last 2 weeks in terms of value, not in terms of feature. Features are great, and that's easy to communicate, but communicate what you've really delivered in terms of business value to the company and to your customers over the last 2 weeks, and what you're planning to deliver in the next 3 months. Scaling your team. When I worked for MoneyGram, MoneyGram is a US-based remittance company, and of course, in the US, cash is still very much king. Everything is based on cash and checks, etc. Meanwhile, here in Southeast Asia and in Africa, everything has switched to QR codes and other forms of digital payment. And trying to get buy-in from the team in the US that we need to build open APIs so that we can, so that all of those digital wallets can integrate into us was very, very difficult. There was just no understanding for that. Then I was able to bring the senior team over to Southeast Asia, and when they saw with their own eyes of how the world has changed here, how everything has been digitalized, everything changed, and suddenly, there was that realization, and then I got the resources to be able to build open APIs, which helped us to integrate with digital wallets in Africa and in Southeast Asia. Same when we launched DoTV in the United Arab Emirates. Once I rolled out set-top boxes to all of the homes of the senior executives of the company, as well as into the offices, everything changed. Suddenly, everybody was using it, and everybody was supporting us in the launch, and that was tremendously important. So getting management buy-in when you're scaling up is tremendously important. When you want to scale up your team in Southeast Asia, hiring is always a challenge, and I'm often asked about that. Now, it makes sense to work with the technology team to make sure that they take framework and language choices that allow them to scale up later on. If you choose a language that very few people speak, in terms of coding languages, then obviously that will create issues for you later on. And also, it is very much a family effort. In Southeast Asia, your work environment, your team often is like your second family. Your boss is like your second mom or your second dad. And so if your team members feel happy at work and it's a safe environment, they trust you, then they're a great source for finding additional resources, finding new resources, asking them to reach out to their family, to their friends, and getting resources into your company in that way. Often also being asked about that, team members, particularly here in Thailand, often don't speak up and are very, very shy. And I think that's only partially true. I think if you create a working environment that allows them to feel safe, create a working environment where you yourself allowed to show weaknesses, etc., then you're really creating an environment that allows your resources, your team resource in Southeast Asia to become very, very active and very, very vocal. And ultimately, that's what you want, and also very engaged, and therefore, become a strong part of your company family, if you like. Having fun, particularly in a place like Thailand, is very important, and so you want to make sure that your work environment is a fun place. Also being asked often that, particular millennials in Southeast Asia don't want to come to the office. They want to work from home. Well, if you're a millennial and you live in Bangkok or you live in Jakarta, then you probably don't live near the office. You probably live 1 or 2 hours away, and because you just can't afford to live in the city center, and so you need to account for the fact that yes, they have long commutes, and it's important to allow them to work from home a number of days per week. If you decide to expand your team through remote resources, whether it's in Vietnam or in India, I found it to be quite challenging at times, simply because of language and cultural differences. And so if you try to have a team that's stretched across different countries, then that can be a challenge. However, if you want to expand remotely in that way, then I advise you to give each team in each country specific responsibilities, so that, with very defined interfaces, so that the collaboration works better. Scaling your operation. When I worked for Shopmatic out of Singapore, we also had an important operation in India, and we were an online app, but we had a whole sales team in India. And I always wondered, why do we have a sales team? We're an online app, we market for it, and why do we have a sales team? And so I flew down to Bangalore and spent a day with the sales team, going from door to door, from shop to shop, and offering our e-commerce app to these merchants. It was a tremendously useful day. I learned that a lot of our potential clients didn't trust us because they'd been cheated by similar companies before. I learned that a lot of the merchants didn't really have a product catalog that they could easily upload into our amazing e-commerce app. But I also learned that if we want to have millions and millions of subscribers, then we couldn't really go door to door. It's just not scalable. And so we moved from being a sales-driven company to a marketing and then a product-driven company, where we really acquire the customers through marketing initially, and then on the app itself, and make sure that customers immediately see value as soon as they start using the app. Now, whether you're a sales-driven or marketing-driven or product-driven organization depends on the environment that you're working in, and depends on the culture of your company, but it's important to understand what that is, articulate that, and then build your product around that. When you want to productize your operation in order to be able to scale up, I always advise my teams to think about what would it take if we had 100 times more customers than what we're actually planning for. And that really makes you think about, all right, well, if we had 100 times more than what we currently plan for, then what does it mean for our contracts? How can we standardize and productize our contracts? What does it mean for onboarding our customers? How can we streamline that and make that a schedule, where we onboard clients within a certain number of days? What does it mean for servicing a customer? What does it mean for offboarding a customer? What does it mean for billing a customer, etc.? So trying to productize absolutely everything that you do so that you can scale. And of course, in Southeast Asia, speed is tremendously important. Southeast Asia is not a 9-to-5 region. And so being able to operate nearly 24/7, whether it's in catering to customer inquiries or whether it's fulfilling, is super, super important. As the more you digitalize of your operation, the more you have access to real-time data, and the faster you can react to any changes and to customer inquiries. And being able to react quickly in Southeast Asia is very important. Here in Southeast Asia, We've got China on one side, we've got Europe, we've got the US, and everybody's observing in Southeast Asia what's happening in these three other regions. And so we learn very, very quickly and we move very, very quickly. And so do your competitors. And so being able to move yourself very quickly, if your competitor suddenly drops their price by 50%, if they suddenly add an amazing feature that you didn't have, then being prepared for that and being able to react quickly is really, really important. Now we know Southeast Asia is a very, very colorful region with lots of different languages that you see on the map here. And with language comes culture, different expectations, different tastes, different humor, but also different payment choices in each of the countries, different legislations, different regulations, different licensing, different channels for marketing and engagement, and also different delivery expectations and complexities. Whether you're shipping to somebody in Singapore or on an island in Philippines makes a huge, huge difference. But on the plus side, also, there's 680 million people here, and the digital adoption and innovation is extremely high, certainly much higher than in other parts of the world. And so I'm often asked by companies, well, we want to come into Southeast Asia, where do we start? And the natural thought is, oh, let's start in Singapore because everybody speaks English there, and it kind of seems easy to make business there. Singapore is a great beachhead, obviously, but it's not great for your growth because actually it's a very, very, very small country. Indonesia obviously has a much, much larger population, but it's also a very, very competitive environment with very, very thin margins. And so depending what business you are in, you may choose to start in one country or another country, whether it's Philippines or Singapore or Malaysia or Indonesia or Thailand. Do you need local presence? Well, if your customers depend on some kind of service from you, then absolutely you do, because your customers will want to know that if they have an issue, they can speak to somebody in their local language. And so having that local presence, whether you're in B2B or in B2C, is very, very important for building trust. And building trust for doing business in Southeast Asia is important. If you're in B2B, you need to build those personal relationships. You cannot expect business to happen overnight. You need to build relationships. And then after some time, maybe some business will come through. Be aware that most people do speak English, but also be aware that most people feel more comfortable speaking their local language. If you're in B2C, again, you need to build trust. And there, maybe you can use local influencers and other kind of digital channels and streaming channels to try to build that trust to conquer the market. Choose a channel that's right for you. If you want to scale up quickly, then marketplaces may be great. But a friend of mine once said marketplaces are a little bit like heroin. It gets you on a high very, very quickly, but it also makes you very dependent. And so depending on what you're trying to achieve, whether you're trying to build customer relationships or whether you're just trying to build a business very, very quickly, marketplaces or D2C channels may be more appropriate for you, or social channels. Obviously, everything is mobile first in Asia. There's no question about that. Rethink, if you're coming from a different region, think about the margins and the pricing. It is different in Southeast Asia. Your margins will be less, prices tend to be much lower in Southeast Asia, and whether it's in B2B or in B2C, and so you need to plan for that. And if you're in B2B, also understand what the payment culture is. Each country in Southeast Asia has a different payment culture. In some countries, they will pay you immediately, and in some countries, it will take a while. So as a conclusion, it's really, really important, and Rose also spoke about that in the previous section. It's really important to establish the value of the product that you're looking to launch for your target customers. Recognize the different local cultures that exist across Southeast Asia. Obviously understand what the regulation is in the countries that you want to go in your particular industry. You don't want to fall foul of that. Try to productize absolutely everything about your company so that you can scale. Adjust the margins and the pricing for Southeast Asia. Digitize so that you can be fast and work really, really hard to earn the trust of your customers. That's it. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Any question? Yes, Rose.
Hi, it's Rose.
Hi, Rose.
Hi. Sorry, I may have missed it in the beginning if you talked about it, but what was your challenging aspect when you were growing in Southeast Asia? What would be the most challenging, or what would be the most challenging for you? What was the most challenging for you?
Well, I think there's the market side where it's really kind of understanding the intricacies of the different markets in Southeast Asia, which is obviously much harder than if you attack a market like US, which is a lot more homogeneous. But I think what I personally found more challenging is learning to work in the context of Southeast Asia, right? Every region in the world and every culture has a different way of working, and so what works really well in Europe doesn't necessarily work well in the Middle East, and what works well in the Middle East doesn't necessarily work well in Singapore or in Thailand. And so I think that's a lifelong learning process, is to learn working effectively with with the people that you work with, finding great talent, and there's a lot of amazing talent in Southeast Asia, and I had the privilege of working with amazing UI UX talent in Southeast Asia, and so it's really kind of learning how to bring out the best in the people that you work with. I think that's because it's an ongoing learning curve.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. What recommendation would you give to an entrepreneur or an executive looking to create business opportunities in Asia to get ready?
So, select a country that is suitable for the product or service that you're looking to offer, and then really test as much as you can, and even if it's on a piece of paper, of whether the value for your product or service is perceived in that market by your target audience. That really has to be the starting point for everything.
And if he doesn't have an idea formed yet, would you recommend that he do maybe an MBA in Singapore or any local schools to kind of get to know the culture and how to do business here?
That absolutely. I mean, in each country in Southeast Asia, you have lots of local meetups, and so you can join those, and you get a sense of both the business environment, the tech environment, and build your network. You can also go to local universities or local MBA programs. So, for instance, Harvard Space here in Bangkok or Chula, they're doing amazing programs where they're helping their students put together propositions for entrepreneurial propositions, if you like, and you can join those sessions to listen to those or even be a judge at those, and that gives you a great sense for what is here, and allows you to kind of find a foot.
All right. Hey, Roberto. It's me, Francesco, here. Just one question. Let's say maybe on the next step compared to what you spoke about so far. Let's say a business that's already launched in a country or a few product is there, is doing relatively well. Let's say the next step could be either trying to aim for complete market domination maybe and reaching some level of margins and profitability there, or potentially expanding aggressively, trying to gain more traction, a larger user base, maybe sacrificing some other aspects. So in your experience, I know every situation is different, but in your experience, what would work best in general? knowing that every country has its own challenging. It's fluid, of course. Maybe some political changes, economical landscape changes, and so forth.
You want to weigh up risk and opportunity, right? And so if you put all of your eggs in one basket, then obviously that's a very high risk. But also if you try to spread yourself very, very thin across many countries without really having a strong foothold in any of them, then you risk not dominating and being profitable in any of them. So my advice would always be to find profitability and healthy growth in one place before you move on to the next one.
All right, thanks.
Hi. Thank you for your talk. I was wondering if you can share anything when you launch in a new market a product and you're refining that product in that market. Like when do you go from focusing on refining the product to saying, hey, the product is ready, we're going to focus on growing it and scaling it? What are some of the key signals you're looking for to say that the product is ready to be scaled?
Well, it's really the signals from your reference customers or from your trial customers, right? So you use your trial customers or your beta customers to identify the market fit. And once you see that you have put everything in place, both in terms of the product, the experience, but also everything else that you need in order to make your product successful, the whole operation around it, if you like, then you're able to switch into hyper-growth mode. But I think the super important point there is it what you do profitable, right? Because if you're losing money and you're scaling up very, very quickly, are you going to lose even more money? Or does the scaling up allow you to become profitable? And again, that very much depends on how much you've productized, how much you've automated, how much you've standardized, right? If you have a lot of manual things in there, then growing very fast just means you're going to lose lots more money, and obviously that's not sustainable. So you really need to have everything in place in terms of being able to scale internally, and then see that if you invest $1 into acquiring a customer, that you actually get back $2, $3 or $10 or $20 in return. If you haven't reached that point, then don't scale up because you're just going to lose more money.
Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts?